Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Um, Welcome back, everybody. We spoke yesterday. We introduced three, I think you could call them like principles of spiritual life. We discussed that it's common to see, it's common for people to identify as being spiritual, but as opposed to religious. But what spiritual means isn't always so clear. It can be left vague. And I suggested these three principles as being spiritual principles and ways that we could define spirituality. Not that they entirely encompass it, but that they're real fundamental to spirituality. Certainly, they're seen all over Eastern spirituality, and I mentioned that they're prominent in the Bhagavad Gita. So I thought today we could read some from the Bhagavad Gita and take a look at them, go through them in more detail. We gave some more back. We briefly introduced them yesterday, and we gave some um, background information about the Bhagavad Gita. But today, maybe we can dig into them more. And again, they were samatvam, which means even-mindedness, samadarshana, which means seeing the spiritual equality of every living being, and antasukha, which means the experience or the conviction of the experience of my happiness being found within myself rather than through any external um, item or a stimulus. But before I start, I just want to check in. And as I said yesterday, I'm always happy to take questions. It's a little more challenging, I suppose, online, but I think everybody probably knows how to raise their hand. And if anybody would like to begin with a question, anything from yesterday, I'm happy to take them now. Uh, would anyone like to? Anyone have a question from yesterday or going into today?
I have a question. I'm
Nope.
sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how to
Yes,
raise
Serena.
my hands.
Yeah, sure.
I was wondering, and if this is a really long answer, please don't um, feel the need to spend a lot of time on this, but we've
Okay.
been studying the Yoga Sutras, and so as we were,
Sure.
and the VS translation was one of the ones that we were using. So I was wondering if you could kind of contextualize where the sutras fit in with the other texts that we were discussing yesterday.
Yeah. So, there's six schools of Indian philosophy, classical schools of Indian philosophy. One of them is yoga. And when we use the term yoga in this way, we're speaking specifically about Patanjali's yoga. Um, and my presentation is coming from another school called Vedanta. But Vedanta is really the school that all the others grow out of, because in Vedanta, the basis of it is the Vedic literature, which are the literatures written by Vyas, or let's say compiled by Vyas. And we spoke a bit about Vyas, the sage Vyasadeva, or Veda Vyasa, Vyasa. He goes by these different names. Um, and so what you find in the Yoga Sutras is derived from Vyasa's texts and other earlier texts. You can read in the sixth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, in a very general way, a description of yoga that is there called dhyana yoga, but it's very much the type of yoga that Patanjali is describing in the Yoga Sutras. So Patanjali took principles of a particular type of yoga um, out of these earlier texts, and he categorized it and codified it in a very clear and powerful way. So it was so clear and striking, I suppose, that it's lasted the course of time. And to this day, people are still reading Yoga Sutras. Um, so historically, that's how it comes down. In terms of practicality, it's interesting that we see in the Bhagavad Gita when Krishna describes Ashtanga Yoga, essentially, and again, it's called Dhyana Yoga in the Bhagavad Gita. When Arjuna hears of it, he says, I really don't think I can do this. It sounds too difficult. He says, because the mind is more difficult to control than the wind. And so I mentioned to all of you yesterday that I felt that all of us have the potential to achieve the goal of yoga, to experience the true nature of the self, to experience states of consciousness like the ones that we read about in the Bhagavad Gita, where it was saying that you feel this incredibly deep inner joy, you feel that you can never be shaken from the truth, you feel that um, there's no greater gain, and so on, that you have this very deep internal spiritual experience. Um, I believe that we all can achieve that. Arjuna felt that he couldn't achieve it through the process of Ashtanga yoga, and I tend to agree with him. And that it's going to be the rare person that achieves it, and that in our day and age, it's a very difficult path. What to speak, Arjuna was saying it was a difficult path, 5,000 years ago. Um, Certainly, there are principles of Ashtanga yoga that are in all the different yogas that are overlap. And I think there's a lot of beauty in Ashtanga yoga and a lot of beautiful principles in it that are also there in Karma yoga or Bhakti yoga, say, that will be more practical for us if we want, not if we're not going to just speak of yoga like it's something in a museum that we study and talk about, but something that we're actually applying to try to achieve those states. I think Patanjali's yoga is very difficult. And Patanjali actually himself will say, he'll describe these states as samadhi and say that it requires incredibly intense endeavor to achieve it. And then he says, or Ishvara Pranidan, or give your life to God, which is very much in the mood of the Bhagavad Gita and the teachings from the Gita. Is that okay? Is that helpful? Anything more on that? That's that's clear?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great, Ariana. Thank you. Anybody else before we move forward? Okay. So I thought let's read a little from the Bhagavad Gita today, and let's just pick out these three things. Again, this inner happiness, this even-mindedness, and equal vision. And I thought I would begin by reading some verses from the fifth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. I'm going to begin with text 18. Text 18 is kind of a famous verse. Vidya Vanaya Sampane Brahmane Gavi Hashtini Shunichaiva Svapakecha Pandita Samadarshana. The humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, they see with Samadarshana, they see with equal vision. A learned and gentle Brahmana. What that means is a learned and a very refined person that's deeply spiritual. We would call them the Brahmana, right? Really, it means a spiritual teacher. It means someone whose qualities and someone whose behavior is very refined and elevated. And so they're seen with an equal mind, this person, and also a cow, an elephant, a dog, and then it uses the term svapaka, which literally it means one who eats dogs. And so here it's like saying someone who's like not so refined, in their behavior, not so attuned to ahimsa, not so, not such a refined, gentle person. So it's kind of giving this polarity of human beings as well as putting in all these different animals in the mix, and saying that a a sage, a humble sage, sees by virtue of true knowledge, he sees them all equally. Now, of course, this person isn't. It's not like they're blind to the physical differences. They recognize the physical differences. And in practicality, they may have to respond to these different people, and by people, I'm including the animals, but respond to them in different ways. But as we were speaking yesterday, there's always one, whether in the background of their awareness or the foreground of their awareness, there's this understanding that underneath it all, underneath the body, and even underneath the behavior, we ended yesterday by talking about how we are all pure sparks of spiritual energy, but we're manifesting through a mind. And so I could take that one step forward. You all remember when I was discussing that yesterday, when we were discussing that yesterday? So we were saying that um, I used the term pure soul theology, right? That the idea, it begins with the idea that we're all pure underneath, but we're all operating through a body and through a mind, and that body and mind have been shaped and formed and sometimes warped through our different experience in the world. And so a person that, a sage that is seeing with this Samadarshana, with this equal vision, can relate to every living being um, with a type of, ultimately, on the highest level, with a type of love, even when it's being manifest in ways that are warped or painful or destructive. And again, it doesn't mean that they don't respond externally to the need of the moment, but it means that within their heart, they bear no animosity. It's always coming from a place of knowledge and a place of compassion. That's what we're asked to do. That's how we're asked to see. Um, that's Samadarshana. I truly feel that these different spiritual qualities that we're discussing here, that they hold the potential to kind of heal us, not only on the individual level, but on the social level as well. And let me give an example of this Samadarshana, because you may have taken note that it mentioned animals as well as human beings here. And I see Aline there has her lovely little friend. Right there we go. And so, when you look into that eyes of, I don't know the name of your dog. Yeah, you can feel free to share.
It's Bodhi.
Okay, Bodhi. So when we look into the eyes of Bodhi, it's hard for us not to recognize that there's a person there. That behind those eyes, there's a being that's feeling, that has experiences. And I think with dogs, it's not difficult at all to see. Dogs, to a large degree, are able to convey their emotions to us. We know when Bodhi is happy. We know when Bodhi's afraid. We know when Bodhi's anxious in some way. That's not hard to see. Bodhi can share um, his emotions, and we can communicate on a relatively, high level. Maybe not as much as a human being, but there's a lot that we can communicate with. What the yogis say is that the body is just a vehicle for the soul, and the soul within us is equal because it's all made of spiritual energy, which means conscious, eternal and conscious. We're all eternal and we're all conscious. We're all sparks of this eternal conscious energy that can never be destroyed, that not only will always exist, but has always existed, that we're eternal. And and that's, that idea may be challenging enough for a lot of people to kind of wrap their heads around. I know for a lot of Western minds, it's difficult to wrap their heads around. But the yogis are going to ask us to go even farther, and they're going to say it's not just in human beings, but if you look wherever we see birth, growth, reproduction, aging and dwindling, and ultimately death, where we see this pattern in matter, then we can understand that there's a soul there, there's a spark there, there's a atma there, a spark of spiritual energy, a conscious living being inside. Because it's only the spark of spiritual energy, the atma, that makes matter um, animated. Otherwise, the body is nothing but dead matter. But it's the spark of life within it that makes it come alive. So if we see birth and growth and reproduction and aging and dwindling and death, that means that the soul is there. And where do we see those symptoms? We see them in human beings, but we also see them in animals. Geraldine also has a friend with us here today. And that friend was born, and that friend grew, and that friend may have reproduced, I don't know, but certainly has, has or had the potential to. Um, and um, and eventually, sadly, our friend will grow older and pass away like all of us. Um, and that means, okay, there's an Atma inside that dog's body, right? The yogis see this. And they say, but Kami raised.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hi, I'm Kemi. What does it mean? What does consciousness mean? I mean, I kind of like can maybe
Yeah,
grasp
no, we
this
should be
idea of,
clear.
yeah.
Yeah. So conscious means we feel, we're aware, right? In other words, so like, I'm sitting at a table right now and I could knock on it and there's nothing inside this table that's experiencing me knocking on it. It has no response. It's not conscious. It has no feelings. So, quite simply, we can say consciousness just means the capacity to experience. And we experience this particularly through the senses of the body. We see things, we hear things, we smell things, we taste things, we touch things, and we have that experience. So the yogis are saying consciousness is an eternal, consciousness is the symptom of spiritual energy. Essentially, they're saying there's two different, if you take this entire universe that we're in, which we could call the material world, that there are two types of energy present. One is material and one is spiritual, matter and spirit. In Sanskrit, we might say pada and apada prakriti, or they'll say purusha and prakriti. Purusha means person, spiritual energy, and prakriti means matter, material energy. And so we are sparks of spiritual energy. That's what we're made of. And the qualities of, again, the qualities of spiritual energy is one, that it's conscious, and two, that it's eternal. So we are conscious eternally. We have always been and always will be, and we always feel and have awareness. Whereas matter, which includes the bodies that we are existing within, are temporary. The energy is always shifting and changing forms. Like we grow older and then we eventually die, and then the body breaks apart and all the ingredients of it separate, and then they go on to take on new forms. And so that's non-conscious matter that's always shifting. Spirit is conscious and never shifting, and matter is unconscious and always shifting. Is that okay, Kimmy? Okay. So we see that our bodies are not conscious, that we're a spark of consciousness that spreads its consciousness through the body. The yogis say like this, that in this region of the area of the heart, the Atma is existing in the human being, the soul. And when the blood comes through this area of the body, it gathers energy from the Atma in the form of consciousness, in the form of awareness. And then that consciousness is spread throughout the entire body, to the tips of my fingers, to the tips of my toes, to the top of my head. Awareness is spread. So if you were to come and touch my little toe, sneak up on me from behind and touch my toe, I would feel it. I would be aware, because this little tiny spark here has spread its awareness through the blood. And wherever the blood flows, the consciousness is there. If you come and tap me on the head, I feel it. If you cut off the flow of blood, like say you take a rope and you tie it very tight, like underneath my knee, and you cut off the flow of blood, then what happens is the awareness becomes duller and duller and duller until it becomes numb. And even not only touch it, you could take a pin and stick it in my toe and I won't even feel it, right? Or where the blood doesn't flow, like say in the nails or in the hair, we can cut them and there's no pain because the blood's not flowing there, and the consciousness isn't flowing there. But that consciousness is the symptom of the self, the symptom of the Atma, the soul. And our consciousness gets spread throughout our body. And I'm forgetting the name of the dog again. Bodhi's little soul in there is just like us and spreading awareness through its dog's body. Habiba? Oh, I'm sorry. There you go. Oh, it's not staying unmuted. There you go.
Hello? Okay,
Yes.
sorry. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Kevin, that was a great question. And I feel like Kaustubha, your answer has sort of sparked a question in me about like depression and what happens when there is still blood flowing through your body, right? It's like
Yeah.
I've, been depressed before and have felt that there's a sort of like loss of feeling. And so I just am curious about sort of the relationship between sort of like consciousness when energy is sort of, yeah, it's I think you described it as yeah, non-conscious matter is always shifting and conscious matter is steady, but then when you sort of still have things working properly, but like your mind is not able
I
to
get
sort
it.
of feel, or there's a sort of an incapacity to feel because of grief or because of a variety of things, then what happens to consciousness in those moments, if that makes sense as a
No,
question.
it makes perfect sense. And so we're not only conscious of physical, and by the way, when the yogis speak of the mind is not spiritual energy, it's material energy as well. It's matter. It's the mind is seen by the yogis as a very subtle computer. It's a piece of machinery. It has no consciousness of its own. It's the consciousness of the Atma that also animates the mind. But the mind is this very subtle, unique piece of machinery. And it's very much like a computer. Like the eyes are like the camera, and the ears are like the microphone. The eyes take in visual data. This way, camera can send visual data to a computer, and the ears take in audio data. And the tactile sense is like a touchpad. It can send physical, touch data, tactile data, and so on. And that information, all that data passes through 3 different applications in the mind and is processed through them and then stored on a hard drive, which in Sanskrit, they'll call it different things. Sometimes they'll call it the chitta, but we could call it the subconscious mind. All the information that we have stored within our mind that we're not currently accessing is our subconscious mind. So we all have a big hard drive full of impressions from our life, memories. And just like on a computer, they call it the memory. So it's our memory. But it's as all the information comes in through the eyes and the ears and so on, and it passes through these 3 applications, which I don't know if we'll have enough time to go into today. But it encodes that memory with an emotional coding. And then it's stored. And so when that memory comes up again in the future, if and when it comes up in the future, it's not only the information, but it's the information with emotion, with feelings like that. And they rise in the mind. And just like any other computer, it can get stuck in loops. It can get stuck in viral kind of responses where it can be very difficult to become free of what's playing out in our mind. Just like a certain file may keep coming up on our computer, or even more, another computer analogy is like algorithms. That which the way that algorithms work, on something like YouTube or Instagram, is the thing that you click on it once, it's going to show you the same thing again. What to speak of, if you click on it a few times, it's going to be showing you that same stuff is going to keep coming up and keep coming up and keep coming up. And so our minds are very much like that. They have their algorithms, and those can be algorithms of sometimes we could call them like negative algorithms, like depression or anxiety or fear and things like this. And so you mentioned not feeling, and I think that not feeling is a feeling itself. It's just trying to numb and turn away from those feelings that keep coming up because we haven't found a way to process them in a healthy way. And that's my understanding of Western psychology, which is very remedial. But that they more or less understood the same thing that these yogis were saying thousands of years ago, that we have these mental loops that keep coming up. And just like with a computer file, you need to find the file that's corrupted, and then you need to put it through like a antivirus program, or you need to erase that file or replace that file. And so our thought processes, we can examine them through a process like psychiatry, where by asking kind of indirect questions, the psychiatrist will get a clue of where the file, at what point was it in your life that you saw something or heard something that created this problematic memory buried deep within you, so that you respond to things that other people respond to in a healthy way, you respond to in an unhealthy way, and it brings up negative feelings and emotions. And then you locate that file, and you put a new impression on top of it, that'll be healthier. And like, take a phobia as kind of like an extreme example. Like, some person is terrified by a little spider, even though the little spider really can't cause us any harm whatsoever, but it'll cause, extreme terror in someone. Why? Well, we need to go deep into the mind to find out where it was, what impression you got that's causing that, and then put some new, more rational information on top of it that can hopefully relieve one of that fear. So, does that address your question?
Yes, thanks so much. And yeah,
I teach a course that really gets into the mind and understanding it like a computer. And when you get into understanding those three applications, it really becomes, these yogis really understood stuff. and it can become very practical. Okay. So thank you. Any other questions before I go on? All right. So then we were discussing, I wanted to share with you this. What I was sharing before the questions was that I feel that this knowledge, I would call it spiritual knowledge, and not in a vague way, in a very clear way, that this kind of spiritual knowledge that the body is a machine, the self is an eternal spark of luminous conscious energy, right? That we are all that not only ourselves, but even the animals are sparks of spiritual energy. And I was saying that the yogis are asking us to stretch our imagination to see if it can accommodate this idea that it's not only that us human beings are spirits, are souls, but the animals also are souls, right? Within the body of the dog is a soul. And where else do we see birth, growth, reproduction, dwindling, death? In the plants. Oh, so you're saying that the plant also has a soul, right? Well, of course it does. Otherwise, what's going to make it grow? What's going to empower it to reproduce? That's life. That's life. And wherever you have life, that means there's a soul, a conscious feeling spark of spiritual energy. Now, here's where the yogis are really going to challenge us. They're going to say that the soul of the human is of the same nature as the soul of the dog, and the same as the soul of the plant. It's not like there's human soul, man soul, woman soul, black soul, white soul, animal soul, dog soul, cat soul, tree soul. No. The soul in all of them is the same. The soul in all of them is the same. Well, if the soul in all of them is the same, then why do they appear so different in how they communicate or how they feel or how they express? They would say that it's the body that they're in temporarily, right? Just for, a few years, which is just a blip in time when you zoom out like a yogi does and you start seeing life in terms of eternity. So for a few moments, we pass through a human body, and then we pass through a dog body, and then we pass through a tree body, and then we're back into the human body, and we're moving around through different bodies. But the same soul, the soul is of the same quality, whatever body it's in, but it's the body that's either expanding or contracting that soul's capacity to feel and to express itself, right? So Bodhi right now is in that dog body, and it's able to express itself and what it's feeling more than it was when it was in a plant body, but less so when Bodhi may take a next birth as a human being and be able to talk and share and feel with more sensitivity and more clarity. So now an analogy for this is like, let's say you came to me and said, Kaustubha, I'm interested to see how fast you are. And on that day, I was borrowing my friend's Porsche, right? And I just got in that car and I zoomed past you at 200 miles an hour and you said, wow, Kaustubha is very fast. But if the next day you asked me again and I didn't have that car, I had some other car that was like not so fast. Or let's say a bicycle, Then I went past you as fast as I could, and it was much slower than the day before. You say, oh, Kaustubha's not so fast, Kaustubha's slow. It's not that I was fast or slow. It's just the vehicle that I was in the moment expanded my capacity or contracted my capacity for speed. And so the yogis are saying that we're all traveling through different bodies. And those bodies are sometimes giving us more capacity or less capacity to feel and to express ourselves. But the soul inside them each is all of the same quality. And we need to see that, and we need to respect all life with that vision. And that vision is called Samadarshana, equal vision. And so that when we read this verse, the humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. This is the kind of vision that it's talking about. Kemi, you have a question.
Yeah. Oh, yes. But also, if it's gonna derail, I can also like ask it at the end.
Okay.
But I am curious why, like, it seems like their soul is kind of like an individual thing,
Yes.
that kind of goes from place to place. Like,
Mhm.
why doesn't it kind of like go into like a universal like pool of souls that are, like a universal. I mean, I'm probably not using the correct terms, but like, what makes a soul discrete, and like, why doesn't it not kind of like go back into like the bigger
Well,
expanse?
so Kim, that's a really interesting question. And I mentioned that I'm speaking from a particular school of philosophy called Vedanta. And in Vedanta, which is the prominent school of Eastern thought from which everything comes, everything that you call Hinduism is directly coming out of it, but Buddhism is growing out of it, and yoga is growing out of it, and all of these things are growing out of it. But within Vedanta, there are two. To be a Vedantin, to practice the philosophy of Vedanta means that you accept these ancient texts written by Vyasadeva as truth. But there are two schools of philosophy that are looking at the same text and interpreting them differently. Because I was mentioning yesterday that these texts are not like what we might be used to, like, here's the truth, get with it now, or you're finished. They come and they speak to you at different levels wherever you're at. And so when you do that, and then you look at the broad, vast body of text, you can interpret them in different ways. And within Vedanta, there's one school that believes that ultimately everything is one. And the feeling of our being an individual right now is an illusion. And when we wake up, we'll find that there is only me. There is only spiritual energy, that I am. And we all kind of realize that together. I'll be honest with you, I have problems with that philosophy. I find a lot of logical contradictions with this. Now, within Vedanta, there's another school that's saying that, and I use this analogy, yesterday, the sun and the sunlight, that there is one prominent soul, or you could say God, from which every other soul emanates. And we are granted individuality. We are our own self. I will always be me, and you will always be you. But we will both be eternal, and we're both made of the energy of God. In that sense, we are one with God. We have the qualities of God. We are the energy of God. But we have our own individual existence and will and freedom. So there are two schools of philosophy. One is saying that when we finally realize who we are, we realize that it's not exactly that we merge into a oneness. We realize that all along we have been this oneness, but we got somehow confused. That's one of the logical problems in my mind. If there is only one, then how did that one become confused, and what confused it? And to me, there are some serious logical issues with that philosophy, but it's been a very prominent philosophy for many, many centuries. So it hasn't lost its grip on, but there are those two different ideas. Both of them are there. Crystal.
Yeah, this is not really a question, more of like a clarification in terms of the terms. I know
Okay.
a lot of people or a lot of philosophers are referring to Vedanta or Hinduism as using a very general term as the Eastern philosophy. I just want to clarify it's not really, because there are still a lot of other philosophies are not in the same of Hinduism, Hindu traditions such as the Confucius and the Taoism, Shintoism. They are not really very in the same path. They are very different approach. So I just want to really clarify that as the Eastern philosophy is really, really broad category covering entire East Asia, um, Southeast Asia. Hinduism and Vedanta is one of the Eastern philosophy. I just want to clarify that.
Yes, but what I would share on top of that is that they grow out of the Vedantic tradition. The concepts of karma and reincarnation and all of that, it's preceded.
Correct.
Yeah,
That's true. That's totally the Vedanta
right. So when I mention Eastern philosophy in
Taoism,
general, it's all growing out of that.
no, disagree.
Okay,
Taoism,
well that's fine.
Confucius are
Uh-huh.
not part of the Vedanta, and the Shintoism, Japanese Shintoism are not part of Vedanta at all.
I'm not saying they're part of Vedanta, but I'm
They are
saying they have.
no, disagree. They
Well,
really
I just agreed with you. I just said that I'm not saying that they're part of Vedanta. They're clearly not part of Vedanta.
exactly, and they are not grow out of Vedanta tradition either.
Okay, well that's where we disagree.
Yes, that's exactly.
Okay.
There was so much. If you study the Taoist and Confucians and also Shinto, they don't have the Vedanta concept or ideas. And also Vedanta is actually from the rishis. A lot of studies have shown Vedanta is actually coming from the astrologism, from the ancient Ottoman Empire. So that is another tradition people has already talking about Vedanta, where they coming from.
Okay, I don't want to get into all the details of it. I would argue that there are elements of Vedanta that have penetrated all of Eastern philosophy, but we don't. If you disagree, that's fine.
I disagree.
But let's not have that debate now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we were discussing now about how within Vedanta or within this particular school of philosophy, this idea was that the soul is equal in all these different forms, even across species. And I was saying how I felt that this idea has the potential to heal us not only on the individual level, but on the social level, or on the broader level, societal level. Let me share with you just one idea, just something to think about, right? And think about this. Imagine if we lived in a society where your entire value, how people saw you, how you were understood, how you were judged, was entirely based on the car that you drove, right? And we may feel like we're kind of in that society a little bit already, but let's say it was extreme, right? The car that you were in, people would look at you based on your car, they would immediately come up with all kind of different ideas about you and who you were and what your value was in society and so on. And so therefore you'd have people that were like driving luxury cars like a Lexus or Mercedes-Benz, and they would have so much privileges in society, and they would be seen a certain way in society. Oh, the doors would open for them in society, and they would get, they would be seen a certain way, like their value would be very high in relation to their car. And then there'd be other people that were in like these economy cars, and they would be looked down upon. Oh, look at them, Now take that and let's take this one step forward. Imagine if within that society that there was kind of a rule or a law or whatever you want to call it, that every day everyone would have to switch cars. So you may be driving a Lexus today, but and everybody else knows that tomorrow you're going to be driving an economy car, and you may be driving an economy car today, But you know, and everybody else knows that tomorrow you're going to be driving a Mercedes or a Lexus or some other vehicle, but not the one that you're in right now. What would that do in terms of how we relate to one another? It would kind of like immediately destroy the class system that would have been like really firmly rooted in our minds, because everybody realizes we're all equal, regardless of the car that we're currently driving. I may be driving this car, you may be driving that car, but we all know that tomorrow we're all going to be driving different cars. Does that make sense? Does that register with everyone? Suddenly we've all become equal, regardless of what our external is in the moment. And this is what this yoga philosophy or this Vedanta philosophy can kind of share and give us this equal vision, this Samadarshana, that regardless of who we are and what body we're in, even across species, the yogi is seeing that we're all shifting bodies. We've all been men, we've all been women, we've all been black, we've all been white, we've all been human, we've all been animal, we've all been plant, we've all been sinner, we've all been saint. We've been going through many, many different incarnations. But underneath it all, we're all made of the same stuff. That's what Samadarshana is, right? And it has the potential to kind of level things in a way where, and when I say level things, what I really mean is not leveling it down, but leveling it up so that we actually can relate to every living being with respect and ultimately with love. That's what Samadarshana is meant to provide for us. Does that make sense? Give me a nod if it's okay. Thank you. So I've only read one verse so far, but let me continue this. The humble sage by virtue of, yes, Catherine, you have a question.
Which chapter and verse are we on? And which translation?
This is 15th chapter. I began with text 18. Now I'll move on to text 19. I'm reading Bhagavad Gita as it is by Bhaktivedanta Swami.
Is it going to be different in different translations, or it should be the same?
Always the translations may vary somewhat. So if you'd like, you can just listen to me read, or as you like. Okay. So text 19. That first text 18 dealt with Samadarshana, this equal vision. Now text 19. Those whose minds, I think your volume, Catherine, is getting some background noise. Yeah, thank you. Those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They are flawless like Brahman. Brahman means the non-personal spiritual oneness, the one person, this one energy. They are flawless like Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahman. That's speaking about this samatvam, even-mindedness, right? Those whose minds are established in sameness. And it's going to go deeper into that now into text 20. A person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant, nor laments upon something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, and who knows the science of God is already situated in transcendence, right? They're not overly, you see, the idea with this samatvam, with this even-mindedness, it's not that you're just like, I know that when we hear this, it may sound like, what, we're not supposed to be happy about things in life, you know? It's not saying that, but what it's saying is that you already know the nature of spiritual energy and the nature of material energy. You know that you are eternal and you will endure no matter what the external situation is. And you know that the nature of the material energy is that it is always shifting. It is going to shift for sure. Whatever is one way right now, it will not be that way in the future. And when you've already come to terms, you see, most of us spend our lives thinking if we can just adjust the external situation nicely, then we'll find happiness. And so we go about, we go to work and we get the money that we think we need in order to make the adjustments, and we try to meet the right people and adjust everything externally so that we can find our happiness. we may be successful or unsuccessful, but even if we're successful, we find that in the course of time, everything shifts. It's kind of like a Rubik's cube. As you're shifting. Does everyone know what a Rubik's cube is? I don't know how badly I'm dating myself when I say that. Some people don't, but is that puzzle? It's like a cube, and it has different colors, and you shift it around, and you try to get all the colors on all sides. But you try to get all the one side all one color, but every time you do that, now you shift something on the other side. And so no matter how many times you keep adjusting it, it's hard to get it all to come together. And that's kind of what life is. We get one part of it together, and then another part starts falling apart. And then we get that part back together, and then something else is falling apart. Because the nature of the material energy is that it's always shifting. A person that has this even-mindedness has come to terms with that. They've come to terms with the idea that everything is going to shift externally. Sometimes it's going to be pleasant, and sometimes it's going to be unpleasant. And going back to Habiba's question, even my own mind, I know that sometimes it's going to feel like it's a sunny day, and sometimes it's going to feel like it's a cloudy day within my own mind. And rather than feel like I am happy or I am depressed today, the yogi looks at the mind and says, my mind is happy. My mind is depressed today. Anyone that wants to have like a powerful spiritual experience at any moment, in one sense, all we need to do is to step back and look at our own mind as an observer. And when we do that, we'll be experiencing that I am spirit looking at a mind. We're actually situated in ourself when we're doing that, because usually we're operating as if we are our thoughts. I am happy. I am sad. We're trapped in the mind, which is an illusion, according to the yogis. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So again, for this even-mindedness or this samatvam, it has so much to do with this coming to terms with the nature of the material energy. I get it. Everything's going to shift. I'm ready for when it shifts, because I have this solid grounding in my own nature that I am eternal and blissful underneath it all. Okay, text 21. Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying pleasure within. And that was the third one, the antasukha, right? Internal happiness, enjoying pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. Now, this is interesting. It's saying that whatever we derive through the senses, the experience that we derive through the senses, in one sense, it's labeling them here as sources of misery, even those pleasant things. Because again, if it's material, eventually we lose it, and eventually it causes pain, right? That's the nature. The material energy is always shifting. What's up today will be down tomorrow, and vice versa. So an intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery which are due to contact with the material senses. O Arjuna, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so a wise person does not delight in them. Right? They find their delight on the inside. Before giving up this present body, right, before we die, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, then they are well situated and happy in this world. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic, and they are liberated in the Supreme, and they ultimately attain the Supreme. Those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, and whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. So here was just one relatively short passage from text 518 to 525 that kind of covered those three elements, even-mindedness, equal vision, and internal happiness. Okay, this is one passage from the Bhagavad Gita. There are several others. Maybe we'll read some more today. But does everyone have feel like, okay, they're getting a feel for it, for these different ideas, and how we could understand this as spirituality? Yeah. When I say, again, this is spiritual, when we say spirituality, it can be very vague. Here's a concrete idea about what, a clear idea of what spirituality is. And we call it spirituality because, and please note that in each case, the ability to see this way has to do with knowledge of the difference between the self, which is made of spirit, and the body and the externals, which are made of matter. So spiritual means with knowledge and understanding of how we are sparks of spirit moving around in material bodies through a constantly changing material world. That's spiritual knowledge, and this is spiritual realization based on spiritual knowledge. Does that connect for everyone? Yes, Catherine?
And correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a little bit of time since we teach this. So there's the spiritual knowledge that comes from, or spiritualism that comes from knowledge. But in the Gita, isn't it sort of explained as being a form of grace also that Arjuna is being given to by Krishna? He's basically saying at one point, you can't see all this, it's beyond you, but I can give you the sight.
Well,
and then Arjuna sees it all and is like, that's too much. Back off.
That was a particular vision of the universal form, and that has more to do with understanding the nature of God, which is an interesting thing. But even just before that, in the chapter before that, Krishna does say, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pratipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mama payantate. That for those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, Krishna says, I give them he uses the word buddhi yogam to him. I give them the intelligence to see all of this. He'll say the intelligence to come to me because he's speaking in a very personal way. This is like God speaking to the soul. But the idea is that within, like say in Bhakti Yoga, the idea that there are different paths of yoga, and some of them are going to be more dependent on one's own yogic discipline and reflection. And I would say in Bhakti Yoga, they would say it's a combination of that, as well as grace, as well as like being God opening the door for you, God granting, when God helping those who help themselves, when one really wants this, and it's really God just fulfilling our desire either way. So if we want to forget God, God is like, I can help you forget. And if we want to turn back, God is like, I can open your eyes and you'll want to come, and then you'll want to come back. So they're different approaches in different kinds of yogas. Bhagavad Gita is going to validate all these different paths of yoga, or at least let's say several different paths of yoga, but it's going to bring to the forefront bhakti, that ultimately divine love is the goal of all this. Why? Because it'll argue that divine love is the nature of the self. If we go down to our very core, what we find there's divine love. And so through divine love, everything is revealed. Thank you. That's a nice question. I thought maybe, especially because I don't know how long I should go, but I thought I could read something about these three facets of spiritual knowledge in a very practical way. And I thought I might read to you from something that I've written myself. I kind of wrote this for like an online recorded kind of course that I did. But it speaks about these three and how they might play out practically in life. Does that sound okay? Everybody happy for that, to hear that? Okay, let me read this. And if you have questions as I read, you could raise your hand and I'll glance over occasionally, see if there's any raised hands. But let's go through this. I was saying this in a practical way, like how one could apply this in their life. And I said, give this a try. Even for 1 week, you could try this in your own life. After you wake up in the morning, get out of bed, and after you take a shower, put on some clean clothes, and then sit down in a quiet place. Take a few deep breaths, maybe say a prayer to God in your heart, and then pick up the Bhagavad Gita and read a chapter. Don't just speed through the texts, but take the verses in and reflect on them. try to let them speak to your soul and to strengthen your intellect so that when you leave the shelter of your home and you begin your daily responsibilities, you'll see things more clearly. Then when you set out for your day, you've got an intention clearly set. You've got a mission to deepen that insight that you gathered in your readings. Okay, think of a spiritual practice like this. I take in potent spiritual knowledge, and as I go about my day, I want to strengthen that. I want to live in such a way where that knowledge matures from theoretical knowledge to deeply realized spiritual insight or wisdom. And so I'm going to reflect on what I heard during the day. I'm going to keep it alive in my mind. I'm going to keep it alive in my life so that I may evolve and begin to see the world that way spontaneously. So as you go to work, you can think, I am not my body. I am not my senses. I'm not even my mind. I am seeing this world. I'm not even the mind that I'm seeing this world through. I am a spark of spirit moving through a material world in a material body. I know that according to my actions in the past, I'm destined for some pleasure today and some suffering as well. Right? We call that karma. I'll witness both of them come and go with an even mind. Right? I won't try to shift it all so that my whole world becomes pleasant. I'll accept the pleasant things that come. I'll accept the unpleasant things that come, knowing that it's my destiny to receive some of both. And I'll witness them come and go with an even mind. Samatvam, right? Even mind. Things may go well at work today, or they may go not so well. That's not under my control. What is under my control is the effort that I give. So I'll give my best effort, and I'll be detached from the results. Whether it's a good day at work or not so good, I won't be depressed or elated either way. I'm not interested in the flickering happiness of material gain. I'm focused on uncovering the steady spiritual happiness that's deep within me. Right? So my happiness is not tied to whether I do good business today or not so good. The business may go well today, it may not go well. I'm going to be focused on this inner experience. Every person that I encounter today, I'll try to see them based on the truth that they are all like me, a pure spark of spiritual energy. I'll try not to judge them based on their body. If they're kind to me, that'll be nice. And if they're unkind, I'll reflect on that truth that I've also been unkind in the past, right? I'll tolerate the unkindness. Think of their eternal spiritual nature and return the unkindness with kindness. That's Samadarshana is going to empower me to do that, right? At every step of the day, choice by choice, you can be training your mind to view the world and respond to the world in a different way. The more you engage the mind in this kind of wisdom, the more the mind picks up on it and begins to respond accordingly. It becomes automatic, second nature. You understand? This is through this reflection, the mind becomes trained to begin to think this way. It begins to make those neural connections spontaneously. And when we make it our second nature, our lives change. This wisdom really goes right to the heart of our conflicts and problems in life. They directly counteract the illusion and fear that's deeply rooted in most of us, deeply rooted for many lifetimes. The mastery of even-mindedness will empower you so that even when things are shifting externally in ways that seem problematic, you won't be shaken. You won't enter into depression, frustration, anger, or conflict. In the face of potential conflict with others, where others are feeling a sense of vulnerability due to fear of change, you'll have a cool head and can become a voice of reason, right? Because you have this even-mindedness. People around you may not have it, but you're going to be like well-grounded. You know that material things are coming and going, always shifting. You've already come to, it may take them time to be able to come to terms with it. You've already come to terms with it, you know. The mastery of equal vision will empower you so that you'll be able to see everyone you meet, every living being as sacred, regardless of who they are, where they're from, or any bodily consideration. This vision will allow you to treat people with a deeper level of respect, a deeper level of kindness, ultimately with a deeper level of love, people will feel this coming from you. You'll gain people's trust, and you'll be empowered to serve as an important instrument of peace wherever you go. The mastery of inner happiness will relieve you of so much unnecessary endeavor. It'll be a huge burden off your back. When you deeply imbibe that your happiness is not dependent on anything external, and that you've got everything that you need to be happy within yourself, you'll no longer feel that you have to impose your needs on others. You'll be free of the fear that you need to change others or the behavior of others in order to be secure and happy. You'll be naturally carefree, freeing up space in your mind and in your heart to care for others. And you can think about that. In other words, a lot of times the heaviest pressures in our life and the greatest elation or depression that we may feel is due to, like, say, romantic relationships, right? Where we place so much weight of our happiness on this relationship, and we're counting on that person's behavior to bring happiness into our life. But they're an individual person that has their own individual concerns as well, and they're looking to us to make their life happy. If there's two yogis that are like, if they understand our happiness comes from within, then what they're doing is, rather than turning to the other person to make their life happy, which is an incredible amount of pressure, really, and is in most cases doomed, for failure. Rather, it's two people helping each other understand themselves, rather than two people trying to complete the other person. And if two people can catch on to that together, then you have potential for a real relationship, a spiritual relationship, a relationship that's like ultimately like truly healthy and based on truth. Otherwise, we're going to be put. I'll read that again, just to this mastery of inner happiness. If the mastery of inner happiness will relieve you of so much unnecessary endeavor, it'll be a huge burden off your back. When you deeply imbibe that your happiness is not dependent on anything external, and that you've got everything that you need to be happy within yourself, you'll no longer feel that you have to impose your needs on others. You'll be free of the fear that you need to change others or the behavior of others in order to be secure and happy. You'll be naturally carefree, freeing up space in your mind and heart to care for others, right? To actually care about other people. When we're actually caring more about others, it's a huge relief for us. When we're totally caught up in everything being just right for ourselves, it's a tremendous burden. And if we can find happiness within ourselves, no matter what the external situation is, then actually we can care about others. And it's really a much more natural, spiritual state to be in, right? The Bhakti Yogis say that our true nature, when you get to the very core of it, it's love, and you could say service, because love is expressed through service. And I think we all find that, like the people, like maybe when we're young, who we respect most is superficial, but hopefully as we grow up a little bit, we begin to really respect those people that we see really care about others, really sacrifice for others. They become our heroes, whether they're famous people or people that we've just come across in life. That ability to sacrifice one's own time, one's own energy, one's own heart for the good of others is the most beautiful thing. And this is the kind of realization that kind of empowers us to do that to realize, you know what, my happiness is within myself. Let me serve others. This is, if we're understanding this, we're beginning to understand spirituality. We're beginning to understand who we really are. Otherwise, we're thinking, I have a mind and I have senses that need to be satisfied. It's actually our true nature is getting hijacked by programming within our own mind, false ideas about what we need to be happy, false ideas about who we are. The yogi is again, as I said yesterday, yoga is a practice that empowers one to overcome the obstacle of the mind for the purpose of the self experiencing their own true nature. So rather than being ruled by my mind, now I'm actually ruling my mind. I'm using it as an instrument. I share this sometimes, but like when I was a kid, it was like when I was like 15 years old, I really began to explore the world, on my own, make my own decisions and so on. And I used to spend a lot of time like in downtown Manhattan. And at that time, it was like, this was like 1981, 82, 83. It was like a real crazy city and like the whole, I could go into bars when I was like 15 years old, like on the Lower East Side and stuff like that. And the whole place was like, just wild crack den and, shooting galleries and all these buildings. They were all burnt out. It was a wild time. But for me, as soon as I would get downtown, I'd feel like freedom. Like now I'm doing what I want to do. Now I'm finally free to live the life that I want to live in. And everything seemed exciting to me, like the music, the drugs, the girls, the whole scene. It just felt like to me like, oh, I'm free. And when I began to learn about yoga years later, I began to realize I wasn't free at all. There was programming in my mind that was telling me that this is happiness, this is success, and I was just following that as if it were true. When real happiness and excitement was inside myself. So how much of our life is dedicated to just following programming in our mind about what we need to be happy, rather than being able to turn within? So here it's saying that it'll free us up to care about others, and that's a life that's worth living, and that's actually a happy life. So these are some ideas about 3 different ways to master the mind, or 3 different ways that we can understand spirituality, what it means to be spiritual, or to think or feel or act in a way that's spiritual. And it's 12:30 now almost, so why don't I just stop here and see if there's any questions or any discussion that any of you would like to have.
Oh, I have a question.
Yes.
So this is like I guess like a lot of what I know about like reincarnation is really informed by pop culture, but I
Sure.
would say that in this yoga teacher training, we have kind of studied a little bit about Buddhism, and like from the stronger perspective and the sutras, there's a sense that we're doing all of this work to kind of have this freedom and like this release. So
Yeah.
I guess I'm just curious, like what from this more kind of like Vedanta, like the school of thought of Vedantam, especially with this idea of like discrete consciousnesses, just kind of like moving from one thing to the next,
Yeah.
what the end, the goal is.
Yes. Okay. You're a deep thinker. You want to get to where is this all going? I'm seeing that, and that's great. Again, there are 2 schools, right? There are 2 schools within Vedanta. One of them is saying that all conception of duality, of individuality, and of form is illusion. So that when you actually break the cycle of reincarnation, you break it when you realize that this entire world is an illusion, and there's no longer any desire in you for it. And when that breaks, all your false conception of the self breaks, and you realize, I am the divine light. That is what I am, and there is nothing else. That's one school of philosophy. The other one is that I've been living in one dream after another dream after another dream after another dream. That I've kind of like this world that we're moving through is kind of a reflection, or let's say a virtual reality. It's a reflection of a spiritual realm wherein there is individuality, wherein there is form, but spiritual form that's not bound by the laws of the material energy, which means constant change and ultimately destruction, and then recreation and destruction and recreation. That in reality, I have an identity, an individual identity, and I have a connection to God in deep love, and for every other living being in connection. This philosophy sees like God is like the root of all existence, and we are like the leaves of the plant. Like if reality is a tree and God is the root and we are the leaves, then we're nourished and we're alive when we're in connection to the root. And so that whatever we see in this world is a reflection, a warped reflection of spiritual reality. So if here there's love, but it's warped and it causes pain, there's love in its perfection. Here there's individuality that causes pain, there's individuality in its perfection. Here there's form and it causes pain, there's form in its perfection. And so that when one, did you ever see, Cami, did you ever see the film Groundhog Day?
No, but I know the idea.
Okay. All right. How many of you have seen the film Groundhog Day? Raise your hand. Okay, so most. Yeah, so the idea there was like a guy that was like, he was like, what's the right word to describe him? Well, let's say he was unevolved, and because of that he was selfish and rude and crude and so on, self-centered, and he was living the same day over and over again. And but he was gradually evolving. He was kind of like learning lessons as he was going through it. And then he finally came to the point where he learned all the lessons that he needed to learn, where he was actually capable of being selfless and being loving. And then when he woke up, and then it was a new day. And so these bhakti yogis, these yogis are saying that that's essentially what we're doing in life. We're going through lifetime after lifetime, trying to be the center, in a sense, trying to be God, trying to, and in so many ways, trying to make this world work and revolve around us. And we're meant to learn lessons. And when we finally learn those lessons, and these lessons have to do with kindness and ultimately with love, then when we're capable of loving purely and selflessly, then we wake up. And we're no longer in this virtual world, this virtual reality, but we wake up into the true reality, which is the spiritual reality, where we have eternal connection and relationship and individuality and form and all of that, but in its perfection. Okay. Thank you, Kemi. Irina, you got a
I
question?
got a question. Yeah. I was wondering about, when we talk about even vision, I'm thinking about equanimity, which we've been learning about
Yes.
as well. I'm wondering, do you sort of see them as the same things? Are they different?
Well, here I would probably use the word equanimity to speak to describe this samatvam, this even-mindedness that we're talking.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. I was like one or the other. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is that it? Would you like
Can
me
you
to
say
say
a
more?
little bit? I mean, yeah, can you say a little bit more?
Well, that again, that's very fundamental in Vedanta philosophy. This idea that it has everything to do with understanding that I am not my body and I am not my mind. There's a statement, like for instance in the text Srimad Bhagavatam, it's mentioned there several times. The way that yogis or these kind of Vedantins think is that they think that just like I don't have to go out and search for misery in life, it comes automatically. In a similar way, I don't need to go out and search for happiness. That comes automatically too. That's based on my karma. That's based on my past, the choices that I've made in the past. So rather than try to adjust the world to find happiness, it's going to, regardless of what I do, it's going to come and go. Let me accept that, and let me focus on my own spiritual existence. Let me go within myself. Let me not waste my energy and constantly trying to change the dials of the material world and become frustrated with it. And then if I've accepted already that happiness and distress come and go, that just like, we all know there's sunny days and when there's sunny days, it's really pleasant. And we all know there are cloudy days and it's not so pleasant. But if a cloudy day comes, it's not like we don't think it's the end of the world. We know, yeah, it's cloudy right now, but it'll be sunny later. And we just kind of accept that. So that's if we don't do that, we won't have the bandwidth. If we can't see life like that, we won't have the bandwidth to go within, and have some deeper, less superficial experiences in life, if we want deep spiritual experiences, then we can't go within until we're content with what's without. Have you? I assume you read the yamas niyamas. You read about that in your studies, and so one of the niyamas is santosha, or contentment, and so that has a lot to do with even-mindedness. Okay, you know what? I'll be content with what I have. This is the food that I have for today. This is the home that I have. This is the material facility that I have. I don't need to constantly be upgrading it. I don't need to constantly be thinking, I need more, I need more, I need more. I need to let go of that. And then with that kind of even-mindedness, I can go deep into spirituality. All right, thank you, Irina. And Habiba.
Hi, I hope this doesn't like derail or
Well, we're at the end anyway,
a
so
long answer.
if we derail a little bit, it'll be good.
But this is kind of in like a sort of a second part question to my question from yesterday about duty, which
Okay.
I think I fully understand, and I think was something that I feel like I have processed. Yeah. But then sort of after, I think in the next chapter, after Lord Krishna talks about sort of this yoga of action, and tells him that like inaction is desirable, like not performing his duty would not be a good thing,
Yes.
sort of grant him dishonor, and that's worse than death. Then he talks about this idea of like sacrifice, and like, sort of like by nourishing the gods, or sort of, by nourishing the gods with sacrifice, then they will sort of offer you the objects that you desire. And so I guess I'm curious about this relationship between like duty, sacrifice, and service, and why Lord Krishna is then talking about sort of like material objects, when isn't the whole point to sort of like relinquish the attachment of that?
You are asking great questions, Habiba, because you see, we spoke yesterday about the 4 Vedas and about the Upanishads and the apparently very distinct ideas that are presented in them. Arjuna was a person that was very familiar with both cultures, the Vedic culture as well as the Upanishadic trend of thinking. And when Krishna is sharing that in the 3rd chapter about sacrifice, he's giving an example that Arjuna can relate to. He's saying, you're familiar with this idea. You see, the Vedas were taking a person from, it's one step up from, I move through this world just to take what I want, here's an example. Let's say you take a child, and that child is like somewhat spoiled. And you ask the child, where do you get your food from? It's interesting. Once I met like a billionaire, and he was asking me to teach him like Bhagavad Gita philosophy. And so I said, okay. And so the first thing that he said to me is, look, I don't believe in God. I don't, he gave me this whole preamble about like how he's like a skeptic spiritually. And I said, look, I'm not here to convince you of anything or to preach to you. But you're asking me to teach you yoga philosophy and Bhagavad Gita philosophy. My job is to present it as it is, and then you can do with it whatever you want. And he said, okay, perfect. That's what I'm looking for. I said, okay. And then before long in our conversation, I brought up the point that I'm going to bring up to you right now. Imagine you have this spoiled kid, and you ask that child, where do you get your food from? Right? And let's say this kid's like 5 years old or something like that. And then the kid says, I get the food myself. Really? How do you do that? Well, I walk to the refrigerator, I open up the door, I take out the food. I said, okay, like on one very superficial level, you are getting your own food. But people that understand your reality more clearly, they understand that no, there is a higher power, right, in that home called your parents. And they are not only a higher power, but they're like a benevolent higher power. They care about you. And they went out and earned money and bought the food and transported the food back to the home and put it in the refrigerator, thinking about your well-being. So the real, on a very superficial level, yes, you do get your own food. But on someone with a deeper understanding understands that really your food is being provided to you by a higher power. Does that make sense? When I said that to this guy, he was like, I'm that kid. That's like, and it was he's thinking I go out and I make my money and I make my whole world. And what the Vedas are saying is no, everything is being granted by higher powers. The sun, the moon, the river, the mountain. It's all, we didn't create any of these things. Our own bodies, we didn't create these bodies. It's all being provided. Recognize it. Express your gratitude. And you're evolving as a person. You're coming deeper into truth. So the 4 Vedas are just to bring you up that one step. And there they say, the rain for your crops, where does it come from? There's a person behind it. There's a God that has a responsibility that provides rain for you. If you are a thoughtful person, you'll express some gratitude through ritual. And through expressing gratitude through ritual, you'll be blessed to get more of these things. And so Krishna is saying to Arjuna that you're familiar with this idea, for this Vedic idea. Now apply that to your entire life. Rather than just make an offering of like grains into a fire, or like the different kind of rituals they have, he's saying that you can take your entire life and make it an offering to God. That there's a principle there, that everything is being provided for us, and we have a natural, loving, reciprocal relationship with not only the gods and goddesses that provide the things of this world, but beyond them, there's the Supreme. And you have a relationship with that Supreme. So he's saying, be active, and not active just because people see you as a coward if you don't. But active because if you are not active, your mind will distract you. So you need to focus your mind and your body in a way that's practical, that keeps you engaged and keeps you focused in yoga. But do it not to get anything material. Because usually when people are working in this world, they're doing it for a result. Why are most people, like Arjuna, he's a warrior. Most warriors are acting to get wealth and fame and power and reputation. He's saying, I want you to do the work, but you're not doing it for those results. You're making an offering of it. You make your entire life an act of sacrifice or a ritual offering like that. And now you're situated in your natural state like that. So when that was being shared, it was an analogy. It wasn't what was being recommended. He wasn't telling Arjuna, now start to do these kind of Vedic rituals. He was using the Vedic ritual as an analogy and saying, look deeper into life and make your entire life an offering. Don't just do superficial Vedic offerings, but do this much deeper spiritual offering of making your entire life an offering. That's what's happening in the 3rd chapter. Okay. If we ever wanted to study in more depth, we really go into these. There's 3 different levels that these teachings are coming on. One, and we spoke about it briefly. We spoke about 2 of them briefly yesterday. One is the Vedic conception of karma. Cultivate good karma through ritual and good behavior to enjoy the world. And then jnana, which means renounce the world, analyze this world for what it is, see it for what it is, analyze your own true nature as spiritual, and walk away from this world, renounce it. So that's called karma, and then jnana. But the 3rd one is called bhakti, which means love. There's a whole devotional section of teachings to these, which are seen as the highest teachings by many. And that is really what we're ultimately meant to evolve towards. And that it's a natural evolution from karma to jnana to bhakti. There's a natural evolution to wanting to enjoy this world, to wanting to renounce this world, to developing divine love that synthesizes the 2 of them. All right. Thank you, Habiba. Bryn.
Hi. So throughout the training, we've been talking about kind of all the teachings that we study within sort of a framework of like, this is the direction for like a super renunciate practitioner, and like these are directions for a householder. And I was curious if you're willing to talk about it. You said when you introduced yourself, you spent a good deal of time living as a monk, and
Yes.
have transitioned out of that into something else. And I'm just wondering, at whatever level you feel like you can answer it right now, how your life was different then, how you feel like has your relationship to these teachings changed? Are there things that you missed or like freedoms that you now have?
That's a great question. Yeah, I'll say this. You see, there's so much background to really be able to. I would have to give a lot of background to be able to answer that thoroughly. So I'm just going to try to convey what I can briefly. But I suppose one lesson that I've really learned, and we spoke about this a bit yesterday, is the distinction between understanding something theoretically and realizing something, the difference between knowledge and wisdom. So I became a monk when I was 21 years old, and I had no responsibility, no responsibilities in life. I was single. I didn't have a family to provide for. And so I just gave myself to it fully, saying my life is in God's hands now. And that was really done through, it was kind of like the Marines, like I had a guru and other kind of like authority, spiritual authority figures in my life, and who I admired. And honestly, if my guru would have said, tomorrow you go to China, I would have been on a plane to China the next day. It's like my life was his. From the moment I would wake up in the morning to I would go to sleep in the evening. Not that I was always around him, but I saw my life in that context. My life is to serve, and there was no freedom in one sense. It was entirely like, just like there's no freedom in the military. You give your life. It was like that, and that was, believe me, that was powerful. That was like really transformative to live that way. And but I'll say this, I was naive in many ways then, and I felt like the reason why people get married is because there's material things they want, material comforts and material pleasures and so on. I must be more spiritually advanced than those people because I'm choosing to go ahead and without those things. Whereas they are not ready to make that commitment. And as I've grown and hopefully matured, I see things in another way. And I'll share a bit. Like about 5 years ago, I began this podcast that I do, and I do it every day. And through this podcast, it's like a whole community of like thousands of listeners have come from it. And there are people that are coming from all different backgrounds. But most of the people that are getting into it are getting into it at a later age than I did. So they're mostly like, I think our biggest demographic is 35 to 45. So these are people that have, done all the things I didn't do, gone to college, then got married, then had kids, then pursued their career. And you reach a stage in life where you may feel like, okay, I had a picture of what my life would be, but now here I am, right? With, a marriage that may or may not be a happy one, maybe a problematic one for at least half of the people out there. It becomes very difficult. With the responsibility of children, the joy of having children, but also the constant anxiety and pain and frustration and occasional tragedy. With, the kind of pleasures that come with like making a living and having your own money and being able to buy your own house and create your own atmosphere. As a monk, I had none of that. I would sleep on the floor wherever I was, and I didn't have my own home, my own environment that I could curate just, according to my own desire. But now, the people that are come to, they've had all of those things. the pleasures that come with it, but also the sufferings that come with it. And you reach this point in your life and you say, okay, now what? There's got to be more to life. I've kind of climbed this ladder. It's brought pleasure and pain. There's got to be something more to life. What is it? And so here's the point, is that the experience of going through that kind of, those ups and downs of life, if it's seen through a spiritual lens, it's very powerful and very transformative. If it's not seen through a spiritual lens, it's just enjoyment and suffering. But if it's seen through a spiritual lens, it's very meaningful. And so as a young monk, I was thinking I understood everything about life, but honestly, it was all just theoretical. And these people that are coming, to spiritual life later in life, even though let me be clear, the training that I had in spirituality has been very valuable. And ideally, you would go through that training and then you would get married and have kids and do all that. And so as you're going through married life, which in one sense is the most materialistic part of life, according to the Vedic tradition, where there's sex and money and all these things, which have a tendency to distract us from spiritual life. I now realize that there were people that were married and it appeared to me externally to be more materialistic, that had a much deeper understanding that I had. And so that's something I've come to understand. Now, my married life has been more simple than most people. My wife is exceptional in the sense that she's deeply spiritual and quite renounced. We never had children. That was her choice. We've lived a relatively simple life. She hasn't placed heavy demands on me. And we've had a very wonderful, cooperative kind of spiritual relationship. But even still, being married, it certainly granted me space and comforts and so on that I didn't have as a monk. And I suppose it affected me for some time. And now as I'm 59 years old now. So now as I'm going into the last segment of my life, I do feel that all of those stages have been beneficial for me. That they all can be, the more that I can see them through the lens of the Bhagavad Gita and these other texts, the more the lessons that I meant to learn from them, I feel, become apparent to me. So, I don't know, maybe I hope that's answered your question to some degree. To go in more depth, it would require, I think, a lot more background information, but I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, no, that was a very sincere and generous answer. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. Thank you very much. Any other questions before we end? We've gone almost to 1 o'clock. Okay, then let me just share again, as I shared with you when we began yesterday, that I enjoy these kind of forums, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate all of you. I appreciate people that have decided, I want to make yoga an important part of my life. That I really admire that, and I'd imagine that many of you would like to teach yoga. Maybe some of you are taking yoga teacher training without necessarily the plan to teach yoga, but just to learn through it, which is great too. Either way, you will all have something to share, something to cultivate within yourself and something to share with others. And that's a beautiful thing. So I congratulate you on pursuing that, and I wish you the best in your future studies. And as I said, I like to make friends this way. If you would like to stay in touch with me, I'm not hard to reach. I'm on Instagram as Kaustubha. I'm on Facebook. I think it's Kaustubha Das. There's several of them on Facebook, but you can find me. And feel free to reach out to me anytime. I teach different things around the city at different times. My podcast, of course, is there. That's practically every day. Wisdom of the Sages. It's not hard to find. And Maya's sharing my Instagram link there. Thank you, Maya. And I'd be happy to stay in touch. So Catherine has shared something. I know there's no time for this, okay? But I wonder, what are your thoughts on falling off the path and getting back on it? How do we deal with the desires and the distractions and stay on the path when we find ourselves stepping off of it. I tell you what, Catherine, I'm going to do this with that question. I'm going to save that. And every Saturday, usually every Saturday, on our podcast, we take questions. And how about I take that question and answer it on our next week's podcast of Wisdom of the Sages?
I would love that. Thank you.
Okay, great. So then you look for Wisdom of the Sages. It would come out next Saturday probably, if not shortly thereafter. And we'll do a Q&A edition, and I'll take that. I'll be happy to take that question. Thank you all so very much. Again, I wish you all the best in your studies, and I hope to see you down the road.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Been a pleasure. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Bo.